It's my pleasure to be here with Representative Angela Orr. Representative Orr, this is you've just completed your second regular session, and we've got a lot more to go this cycle. But before coming to the Texas House, this is not your first effort at serving. Tell folks a little bit about your path to the Texas House.
Well, it's kind of a story in itself. 20-something years ago, at the First Baptist Church in Hillsboro, I sat across the aisle from Mel Bryant, who was our Republican Party chair. And he was looking for a precinct chair up here in Itasca, Precinct 10. And he had noted that I voted every time I got the chance. And so he recruited me to be an election judge, and then I became a precinct chair. And then I ran a contested school board race and won. And then a few years later, we had one Democrat left in the courthouse. That was the district clerk. And after a 40-minute phone call, I agreed to take that on. And so I had a primary and a runoff and a general, and I won that. And so I was an elected official here for many years before going to the State House. So I've served in a lot of capacities. I've been involved in a lot of local government, especially in this rural county.
Well, so you had experience serving locally, and now you've been in the State House for a couple of sessions. How has your experience of serving in the State House been different from serving locally?
I would say it's expanded. Instead of having one county now, I represent 7. So that's a big difference, but it's the same methodology. Get to know local concerns, get to know local elected officials, get to know my schools. And I do think it kind of sets me up in a unique position. There's not a lot of state reps that have served on the local level, or some that have never been elected before. And so I think that has been really helpful in my journey as a state rep.
I can see absolutely why. And we're going to talk about a bunch of issues, but when you talk to your voters locally, which I'm sure you do, what would you say are the top issues that you're hearing about and that you're therefore focused on?
Yeah, we want to keep rural Texas rural. We're very conservative out here. We have a lot of churches and schools and things that we love, and we want to keep the things that we love safe from harm and other influences. We also have a lot of small businesses out here, so we're very concerned about that. And certainly agriculture is a huge thing, as you can see going on around us.
Absolutely. Well, and you're right, there are issues that are rural specific, and there are broader issues that affect the entire state that you're also now involved in. And one of those is protecting against foreign hostile adversaries. And in the 89th legislature, you passed a large package of bills to combat the influence of foreign adversaries in Texas. Can you talk about that?
Yes, I carried HB 128, which we called it the Sister City Bill. And that was something that I didn't know a whole lot about, but I got to studying. And a lot of cities, San Antonio, Fort Worth, Austin, mostly bigger cities, have these innocent-looking sister city agreements with some of our foreign adversaries. And so we dug in and we looked at what those agreements look like. They're not easy to find, first of all, but if you can find one, what you find is these sister cities, say in China, they'd like to know where your water supply is, how your electricity is produced, what kind of health care you provide your residents. It's not all just, hey, come visit us. It actually, we looked at an agreement from 2012, and in light of what we know to be true today, you look back at that and you think, man, that's a lot of information. And while the cities were thinking this doesn't harm anybody, those people are our constituents too. And if their personal information is being shared in a way that perhaps isn't in their best interest or the national interest, then we need to know that. And so the governor signed that bill, and it takes place on September 1st of this year. If you have one of those agreements, you need to dissolve it, and you don't get to form one going forward for the time being.
Oh, certainly an issue that affects all of us, and that every influence of foreign adversaries. You told us about the sister cities and how good intentions went awry. What else has the legislature done to deal with challenges from foreign adversaries?
The legislation that we passed preventing them from owning farmland in Texas is huge. I don't think people realize how much farmland was being purchased by foreign adversaries, how close it was to our military installations. It's a threat to our safety and our food production. And so I think it was really important. And I think we've seen some other states do it, but I think we did it the best way.
That's great. And that was actually through SB 17?
That's correct. That's correct. And I think, there was obviously a lot of debate about it, but at the end of the day, the House and the Senate came together and we got that worked out.
Can you tell us a little more about what the legislature did to protect Texas from foreign adversary incursions in Texas?
Well, I think it's important to know that Texas is leading the way in the nation to provide this legislation. And I think the protections that are there are going to make a huge difference in our personal safety and our food production and our national safety. So I'm proud to be a part of that. It was a really big deal.
Yeah, foreign adversaries are something to take very seriously, especially considering who they are.
Exactly, and that they don't necessarily have our values in mind. And foreign adversaries like China should not be buying up Texas land.
The high-speed rail project, particularly the Dallas to Houston segment, was in the spotlight this session, with several bills filed regarding the issue. You joint-authored HB 2003 to bring greater transparency, not just to this, but to projects like this. Tell us more about your reasons for supporting this legislation and its significance to your district.
Yeah, it's a really hot topic in the district because of the eminent domain procedure that was potentially taking place and did take place in some cases. But I think what's interesting to note about it is it was a purely private venture until it wasn't. And once they wanted to make it a public venture, well, then we had questions. And we brought them in for a committee hearing, and they really didn't want to answer our questions. So that was a problem. Then Trump and Jake Elzy killed the finances for Amtrak. And that made a huge difference because now they can't get money from the feds. And so I hope that the issue has been put to bed, but we'll see. We're going to keep our eye on it. We don't want that project going through our district and taking homeowners and farms and ranches from people with really no promise that it'll ever be completed.
Absolutely. And so do you consider the battle over this rail project to be over, or do you think there might be even more work to be done on it?
I think they should consider it to be over, but we'll be keeping an eye on it.
As you should. Well, and HB 2003 dealt with this and the eminent domain challenges, but because of that, it actually applies broader and more long-term as a protection for Texans going forward?
Yes, and it provides for transparency. If we're going to be making these deals, then we need to know who's making them, what kind of finances they have, and what their intentions are.
Absolutely. Well, this session saw a lot of movement behind parent empowerment, school choice, and curriculum transparency. What reforms do you want to highlight, and what still needs to be done?
There weren't a lot of gifts from COVID, but one of them was that parents learned what their children were being exposed to. And I think that created an opportunity to look at what they're being taught, the curriculum they're being taught, and STAR testing as well. And so if you look at it from that perspective, parents getting engaged, getting involved, asking questions. I'm not sad to see the STAR test go away. I remember how stressed out my kids were when they were in school. But as a parent, I could appreciate a test that happened maybe 3 times a year and was more of an evaluation of where are we? What do you need to learn? What are your soft spots? Instead of just one big test at the end of the year that everybody stresses out about. So I'm encouraged by that. And I'm also encouraged by how many parents really want to know and be involved in what's being taught in our schools.
Absolutely. So what would you say is your top priority during the special session when it comes to education?
Well, I'd like to see the STAR test go away and us find a better solution for our kids.
I'm sure that's absolutely possible. Conservatives have been clear that education should not be a pipeline for indoctrination. What reforms were passed this past session to protect students from bias in the classroom, and what do you think still needs to happen?
Well, a lot of what we dealt with this session had to do with transparency, so I think that is going to help quite a bit. The legislation we passed, HB 100, about curriculum that has to be approved by the State Board of Education. That's going to help. We've got elected folks on that, so if you have a problem, you want to run or you want to influence them, that's a possibility. And also, I just think we need to engage our children and not just tell them what to think. We need to teach them how to think. And I remember being in school and being in debate. I was one of those debate nerds, and sometimes the teacher would just give you a position. You didn't necessarily get to choose which side you wanted to be on, but it forced you to see something from another perspective and be able to defend it. And I worry that our kids today come out of school kind of pre-programmed, and what we really need are people that can think and debate their own issues. So I hope we move towards something like that.
Well, and the ability to take on different perspectives and to learn about different perspectives, that's part of why folks fought for school choice and parent empowerment and the ability to choose different options for their kids. There were bills that were passed this time that had a big impact on their local school district. Tell us about those.
Well, things that we didn't necessarily imagine that we needed to do, like removing sexually explicit material from our libraries. I was very surprised in the committee hearing to hear some of the stories that we heard, so I was glad to support that bill. And then we did the 10 Commandments. We're going to put the 10 Commandments back in the classroom. I think it is a fundamental lesson, and I'm glad to see that is happening. As far as our local schools go, we did historic funding for our local schools, $8.5 billion, primarily on teacher raises, but also for people that drive buses and work in the cafeteria, they're going to see some improvement in their salary as well.
This session, you authored HB 4435, which established the Texas AIM program to train healthcare providers and reduce maternal mortality and severe morbidity. As a pro-life conservative, why did you see this as a top priority, and how does it reflect a life-affirming approach to protecting mothers and their unborn children?
Yes, a very important bill, and it was a data-driven bill. Many years ago, a study was done, and it showed that we had a pretty high rate of maternal mortality. And as Texans, we didn't accept that. We did our own study, and even though it was lower when we studied it, it still was too high. And so statewide, we started looking at ways to cure the problem, whether it was a sepsis infection or high blood pressure. It was kind of this collaborative effort to say, mothers shouldn't be dying from these causes. How do we resolve this? And so the program developed what we call bundles of information. It has to do with training healthcare providers, giving them some of the equipment or testing stuff that they need, but covering the state in that kind of education, and then having the hospitals report back and tell us, did you lose a mom? If you did, what was the cause? And so we've seen the data that proves that this works. And we're a pro-life state. And it shouldn't just be pro-life in Austin, Texas. It needs to be pro-life in Clifton, Texas, or Fairfield, Texas. And so what I really liked about the bill is it wasn't confined to just metropolitan areas. We're looking for solutions across Texas. And so I was really happy to see that bill get passed.
That's right. Well, you also co-authored HB 5510 to crack down on the out-of-state mailing of abortion pills. While that didn't actually pass this session, the special session agenda includes some measures to restrict medicated abortions and strengthen enforcement. What are your top priorities for the legislation during this special session?
I think a lot of people were shocked to even hear that was an issue, first of all. I'm not surprised it didn't pass just based on that. We had to kind of catch up, but I don't think people realized what a problem that it was. And even our estimates aren't that accurate. We have no idea, really, how many of these pills are coming in. And then there's the notion that women order them and take them themselves. Well, now it's coming to light that other people are ordering them and giving them. And so we've got to challenge that, and we've got to push back. And this bill provided civil penalties for people that participate, not moms, but the people providing the drugs. And I think it's important to save every life we can, but particularly when somebody in New York is sending a drug to Texas for someone they've never met, have no medical concern for, we've got to strengthen our laws against that.
So Texas has enacted some of the strongest protections for unborn children in the country. And as a pro-life legislator, tell us about a couple other things that you were involved with that were really important this session.
So I was chair of Article 2, Health and Human Services Appropriations, $100 billion of the state budget. One of the things we did is we continued and added to funding for Thriving Texas Families, which provides services for expectant moms to try to help them get prepared for a new baby. And then the other thing was Baby Moses, which was passed in previous sessions. But we just found that a lot of babies have been abandoned in Harris County over the last year or two. We want to solve the problem. The service is available. Maybe moms don't know about it. So we looked at the hotline, we looked at the website, we looked at the way the program is managed. And so we're really just going to reach back out and see if there's ways to strengthen that program. We care about every life, and a life that is lost because a mom didn't know she had a safe place to bring her baby is a loss that we shouldn't have.
You represent House District 13. It's a beautiful district, but it's one of the rural districts that sometimes gets overlooked. Tell folks about your great district.
Well, it is a great district. 6.5 counties throughout central Texas, running from west of I-35 to east of I-45. 6 of these counties are ruled by definition, and a half a county of McLennan County, which is the rural population and part of the city there. But 41 independent school districts, 51 municipalities, 7 commissioners' courts, a lot of local government. I hear from a lot of local people that communicate directly with me in House District 13.
That's fantastic. But in spite of being a great district, as a rural district, it can feel overlooked in statewide policymaking. What are the most meaningful wins for your district and other rural Texas districts that came out of this session?
We had some historic funding for rural hospitals, which we talked about how important rural hospitals are across the state. I believe it was HB 18, which provided some loans for rural hospitals to expand and operate. We also had HB 3000, which had to do with ambulance service. That came about as a result of the wildfires. We found a lot of rural ambulances, ambulance services and emergency services district really lacked the funding that they needed to purchase the equipment that was necessary. And so this provides a grant program for rural ambulance providers. Also farming, HB 43 is a really big deal here. It increased it got rid of the age restrictions on lending for farm. It expanded what a producer definition is. It expanded the amount that you could borrow, reduced the interest rate. You know, we had 17,000 producers leave the state in the last year or so. And so we can't afford to lose any more farms in the state of Texas. And so that bill helped with that. And then the other had to do with rural water. Not just, we don't irrigate our farms here, but our cities certainly need water. With 51 municipalities, that's a lot of cities dealing with water. Most of these little towns have aging infrastructure. And so the water bill helps cities like the one we live near here be able to get money to restore their water supply system, their distribution lines. And these are problems across the state that we've seen. It's not just, do you have the water? It's how much water are you losing when you're trying to distribute it? And so I think this is something the state's going to have to address, especially if we want to keep people in rural Texas, because a lot of towns don't have the money to make these repairs. And so this water bill is going to help with that a lot.
Absolutely. What in particular were you able to work on this session to make sure that rural Texas needs weren't overshadowed by urban Texas needs?
Well, we have a lot of conversations. Like I said, my local officials are not afraid to come to Austin and tell me what they think about a large matter of things. And so we work closely with them. We want to know legislation that sounds good in Austin, how does that filter down to the local level? Having been in local government for 20 years, I've got a lot of friends that are still on school board. I've got prosecutors and judges and clerks across the state that come to me and say, I know this looks good on paper, but when it gets down to where the rubber meets the road, these are the challenges we're going to face as a small community. And so sometimes it's those kind of discussions that I have with people in my district and out that I take to some of the members that are in a more urban district and say, I understand your intent, but this is how it's really going to affect us. And maybe there's not money to help us with that, or maybe it just doesn't apply. One size doesn't always fit all in Texas.
Absolutely. Well, you started about access for urban areas.
That's right. We're seeing that. We're seeing investors come to rural Texas, buy a bunch of land, and decide to pump it and ship it to rural entities. And we're going to have to fight back. We cannot lose our water here locally. And so that's the problem that we're going to have to be solving for.
You joint authored and helped pass groundbreaking legislation this session to support ibogaine research. Tell us about that.
Well, it is very important to our veterans, which is something that is near and dear to my heart. This initiative was supported by former Governor Rick Perry, Navy SEAL Marcus Luttrell, now RFK and Jr. and Trump are on board. I think it is such an important thing that will provide relief for people that have traumatic brain injuries or PTSD disorders as a result of serving our country, and they deserve the most help we can get them. And I think there's some promising studies that show that ibogaine may be the answer we've been looking for.
And why is this a thing that needed legislation?
Well, it's actually illegal in our 50 states currently. And so people that seek this treatment actually have to leave the country to get it right now. But it treats such a variety of issues. Again, traumatic brain disorder, PTSD, opioid addiction, alcoholism. It's showing promising for Parkinson's and MS. And I think the thing that was really compelling to me is that one treatment can make a difference. Now, it's not an easy treatment. It's not something that someone would use for recreational purposes. It's got cardiac implications. You have to be monitored in a healthcare facility by a healthcare professional to receive it. But studies are really promising that this is going to break the cycle of addiction for veterans and for others. And I think it is so important that if we're going to send people off to war to fight for us, that when they come home, we do everything that's humanly possible to restore them to health. Because it doesn't just affect them personally, it affects their families, their children, generations. And we see what a difference just healing that one person can make.
And how specifically did this bill enable that ibogaine application?
So Kentucky got really close to passing this, but failed. So we kind of had a roadmap of what that would look like. But in Texas, we're going to partner with medical institutions through our universities to do the studies to see in a scientific way if this does hold the promise that we think it does. And if so, then Texas will have a seat at the table and have some skin in the game.
So again, Texas is leading on an important issue.
Absolutely. And I think we have so many veterans in Texas that this was where it needed to start. And so I'm really proud to be part of that.
During the 89th legislative session, lawmakers passed HB 229, which establishes clear legal definitions of male and female in the state statute. Why do you believe this clarification is important, and how do you see it laying the groundwork for future protections?
If you had told me that we needed to pass a law to define this, I wouldn't have believed you. But here we are. You have to remember that Texas government is made up of a number of agencies. We needed to define it kind of from the top down so that we could all agree that there are only two biological sexes. And, this is going to set the record straight for schools, judiciary, state agencies across the board. I wouldn't have thought that it needed to be done, but apparently we did need to do it. And I was happy to support it. It was one of the longest debates we had on the House floor. And it was just really enlightening.
Well, I think, as you said, during COVID, we learned a lot of things we didn't know, and some of what was going on with mix-up of the sexes was one of those.
Exactly. And if you care about healthcare, just as an example, it's important to know and be able to define whether you're a man or a woman. Isn't that like the first thing they ask you when you get to the hospital besides your date of birth? And so this will make some clarity, and it will also make it contiguous throughout all the agencies so that we don't have any ambiguity.
So it does boggle the mind that those definitions were needed and that clarity was needed, but having put that clarity in place, what does that lay the groundwork for?
Well, we're not going to have to deal with Title IX. We need to clarify that men belong in men's sports and women belong in women's sports. We don't need to debate bathrooms anymore. We need to clarify it for educational purposes in our institutions. But you know, as a woman, being in a bathroom or a locker room is a vulnerable space anyway. And to the thought that a man could be in there with me or a small child, female child, it's disturbing. And I can't believe we're at a place where we have to legislate that. But I've seen it for myself at the state capitol, so I know it happens.
So what would you say is the most important issue to work on going forward?
We've got to work on the issue of eliminating property tax for Texans. You know, the state of Texas does not set property tax. That's set on the local level by your school boards, your municipalities, and your counties. But at the state, we have been dealing with them and providing property tax relief. But we've got to move towards elimination. That's going to be working with local elected officials to try to figure out how the best way is to approach that. And as a former local elected official myself, I'm glad to be part of that process in Austin.